Margaret, smile, wait. All right, one more.
Be assertive.
Don't be afraid.
Meher Baba ki jai.
Meher Baba ki jai. Meher Baba ki jai.
Jai Baba, everyone.
Jai Baba.
We have a very special guest tonight. We're really looking forward to this. I'll let Tony introduce her. I just have a couple of announcements, and I'll keep it brief. First, Billy Eaton. Billy Eaton fell. I think she fell on the street. I'm not sure. In her house? And she hurt her left hip, and she went to the hospital, and now she's in rehab, basically. She's in physical therapy for, could be 6 weeks. So she's right now at the Amsterdam nursing home. The address is 1060 Amsterdam, which is 112th Street in Amsterdam. Just said Amsterdam 3 times. Room 1103. I have the phone number there. I tried to call the nursing home and have not been able to get through. But if you want to try, I have
She's
the
okay.
number.
She does not pick up because she's busy all day with visitors.
Yeah.
She's been very
So
cheerful.
she's not
You
pick
saw her
up.
in the hospital, didn't you?
It does not make sense to.
So yeah, Bob, why don't you tell us, how is she doing? You've seen her.
I saw her in the hospital one day. She looked wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderfully.
I spoke to her when she was in the hospital before the nursing home, and she did sound very cheerful.
Feisty even.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
She was actually more concerned about, wow, you took the time to call me. I mean, she's so sweet.
I thought maybe we should have a little Baba meeting there. We could have like a little gathering there.
If she's going to be there for 6 weeks, it's feasible.
We could organize
She's gonna
something
be
and
there
just.
only 3 weeks, my dear. After 3 weeks, I was
dear,
there
I
for
had that all
3
the
weeks. She comes home and she will have for 2 months home attendant. But as far as I know, Billy planned to go to Chicago. She's invited for Sahavas, so she hopes that she will be okay by this time. And she even planned to come for Adele.
For Adele
So
Walker.
she's okay.
Excellent.
She's quite okay.
She's amazing.
What's the phone number?
The phone number I have is 212-316-7700, and
What's the name of this?
the room is 1103.
as far as
This is the Amsterdam nursing home.
You know, her hearing aid is not working properly.
Corner
if you call her on
112th
the
in
phone,
Amsterdam, 1060.
She won't hear you.
The phone is broken. I don't think a lot of people heard you say that she.
But I think it would be great if we could organize a little
That would be fun.
Marilyn,
Baba roast or something.
Yes.
her hearing aid is not, she doesn't have batteries right now. So
Oh.
you're going to have a hard time speaking to her on the phone for the next few days.
That's the
So use your alphabet.
general number, so you'd have to
Yeah.
use the
Over the phone.
Okay.
communicate silently through there. So that's the big announcement.
When did this happen, by the way?
3 weeks
Friday,
ago?
something like the 28th, something like that. Friday the 28th.
Was it 2 weeks ago?
Actually, it's only been a little bit over a week,
Oh.
because it was just before the meeting last week that we heard.
Wow.
She's a hardy sort. She's amazing.
Cynthia's doing a great job taking care of us and kind of pulling everything together. I guess.
112th in Amsterdam.
112th in Amsterdam, room 1103.
Tell me that's really an amazing shirt. Amazing.
It's a hand-me-down.
Have to put on my blinders here.
It's a hand-me-down. I bought it at the patient's flea market. I run it again.
It's you.
There you go.
Okay.
The fabulous way.
Yay! All right. Don't you love the photo?
And I apologize for all the alphabetical out of order mistakes and any other mistakes that might have been made.
Ahead of time.
Please let me know if there are mistakes. Don's already told me that half the people on that list have passed away.
Jeez!
Or otherwise moved.
We're the other half.
What? Somebody told me about this.
How do you get the
About
flash
what?
to do it?
Smack in the middle.
Yeah.
Paula said that Billy's very tired.
From visitors. So if you guys want to visit her, you'll be awkward because she's, people comes all the day and she complaining that she's tired and she's sleeping.
Isn't that one?
So don't think that she's lonely and above.
Don't think she's
So,
lonely.
Angela, I tell you, before you make an announcement, ask, because if many people will come simultaneously, it's no good for her.
This?
Okay. One word and over.
One other quick announcement, and that is that last week we had a really excellent brainstorming session for the Home for Baba House, and the vision is big. It's wonderful. We have in our vision a space that we would permanently own. We would buy a space in Manhattan, which is exciting, and within that space, obviously Meher Baba House events, but also an information center, including a library, archives, that sort of thing. That's the basics. But we also have ideas for a community center around this. So within that, there would be a lot of services that the community could use, a rec room, meditation room, various other services of that sort. And then we could possibly branch into counseling and other sorts of support for the community, and even possibly some branching out into health. There was an idea for an assisted living facility. So the vision goes on. We can branch out many places.
Casino.
A casino. You'll run the casino.
How are we planning to pay for this?
Your donations.
Put this in consideration.
Your tax dollars.
Your tax deductible donation.
Well, she's giving you a
An
refund.
idea just occurred to me that you could rent out space.
Yes.
To
Definitely, we would rent out space. We have, as part of the vision, a spiritual center, which would be open to other members of the spiritual community. And, that part of it will have to develop as far as
But I
how we're
didn't
doing.
mean rent out space like for evenings. I meant rent out blocks of space
How much
for
it could
tenants,
cost?
sub-tenants. You know what I mean?
Tennis?
Well, we're thinking of allowing for overnight guests, so that would be nice,
But that's
places for
transient. You know what I'm saying?
And then, of course,
Come to the next brainstorming session.
When is the next brainstorming session?
one more thing, and then a big art center, which of course Baba was very much into the arts, so visual arts, but also theater, music, and music rooms, recording studios. I mean, we could go on and on as far as that's concerned. If we have enough momentum, we could have like our own TV channel. I mean, what the hey, our own radio.
Our own embedded reporters.
Embedded in life.
I don't know if we need all that, to be honest with you, but go on.
We may not need it, though, do we want it?
But how the money come?
Does Baba want it?
Right now, right now, we're
How-
talking about everything south of Canal Street is what we want.
We want some of everything. Yeah, there you go. So our
Some of
next
each.
brainstorm / idea meeting will be June 28th, that's a Saturday, at which point we will talk more about ideas for fundraising, ideas for how to make this actually start to go in a realistic direction. Visions are important.
Do we have any sort of business plan, sort of like a business plan?
I think it's a bit early, but no, not yet.
Okay, I can start to help you.
Oh, that'd
That's
be great.
great,
Great, thank you. Without further ado, Tony, if you introduce Julie Margaret.
June 28th?
Yes.
It's a Saturday.
It is my great honor and privilege to introduce Julia Margaret Brigham, who will be addressing us tonight. My comments will be brief. I just have a few notes. Julia Margaret was born in a little town. What I thought would...
Everyone's a comedian.
On May 24th, 1932, Baba was with a group of disciples, I think it was in England, and at one point plucked a flower.
It was in Harmon.
It was Harmon,
Yeah.
and gave it to Elizabeth Patterson, and he said, save this and mark down the date. And she did. She pressed it in a book, and the date's there, May 24, 1932. I think you can see it at the center in Myrtle Beach. And of course, she didn't question why. She knew if Baba said, just do it, it will be clear at some point what it's about. And over the years, Baba said many times, several times, that he would have to shed his blood on American soil as part of his work. Sometimes putting it, America is calling for my blood. And in 1952, while crossing the American continent from Myrtle Beach to the West Coast, Baba and the disciples traveling with him were involved in a very serious car accident in a little town called Prague, Oklahoma, which I call Prague, but they call Prague, so they win. They live there. And it was a Korean War veteran amputee who was in a specially fitted car, and he just came over the hill, and it just, before anyone knew it had happened. And Baba was seriously injured. Mara was very much injured, a few of the others. Mani was not, which was good because she was, well, Julia will tell you what that part. But they took Baba to a small local hospital that was owned and operated by a Dr. Ned Burleson. And that's Julia Margaret's dad. And so she got to meet Baba when she was just a child. And will be sharing with us the story of those times and the time since then. So thank you so much. Julia Margaret.
I want to thank you all for having me. First of all, it's just really an honor to be here, and I'm having a wonderful time. I've always had a wonderful time meeting Baba lovers and being with you, so it's great. And so now I can count myself as one. But I'll tell you that story. I guess school had just let out in Oklahoma, and I was 10 years old. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I was 10 years old, and we lived in a big two-story house. It was on this part of the block. It was just there was another house here, and right behind us was the hospital. So there's just an alleyway between our house and yard and the hospital. So, you know, one of the big deals was anytime the ambulance came, my sister and I, or usually me, I would run out and hide kind of in the flower bed. We had a rock wall around the house. You were there. And I would just sort of peek over that wall and just see what was happening. And I remember that I heard the ambulance, and I ran to the front of the house, and I saw it go by, and so I thought, And I ran to my spot in the garden and peeked over the wall, and I saw them take, I didn't know at the time, but it was Amira and Baba out. And there was just all this, I mean, people were just kind of wild at that point, and then another car drove up, and more people got out that were just all very agitated and wild. And one of the funny, well, it wasn't funny, but I guess to us it was funny at the time. One of the fellows that he was driving the ambulance, and I remember my dad came home and said, "Boy, Bob Parks really made a mistake today. He picked this lady up, and she wasn't supposed to be touched by men." And but what really happened? I had seen her, and all the years I thought she had like a red stone in her forehead, but that's where she was bleeding. And so all the years, is from being a little child coming, I always thought she had a red stone in her forehead. But that's where her face was cut really badly, and she had a lot of glass, and her, I guess she always had that scar afterwards. But when things like that happened, we knew that Daddy was going to be really busy, and we didn't bother him. We didn't go to the hospital. But normally, we would just run over to the hospital several times a day and get Coke, talk to people and see what was going on. But that was a pretty serious time. And he came home and he was talking about Baba. And he said, "These people are from India. And this one fellow over there, his name is Baba. And he won't talk. Now, they told me that he could talk, but he chooses not to talk." And he's a lot of what I say kind of comes from things I've read too, that Baba really wanted Merritt to be taken care of first. But all of the other people were just kind of pulling on Daddy, saying, no, go take care of Baba, go take care of Baba. But Baba wasn't hurt as badly as Mara was. And I guess she had a lot of glass in her face, and to use my dad's term, it was a mess. It was just a mess. And he was really busy working with her, but everybody else was saying, "No, go take care of Baba." So it kind of irritated him. He wanted to say, "Whoever this Baba guy is, he can wait." And but Daddy was very impressed with everyone that came. All the people that came during those almost 2 weeks were just lovely people. And he was most impressed with Baba, because he said even though Baba, he knew he was in a lot of pain, he never made a sound. And he always smiled at him, and he would always ask about his family. And of course, Monty wasn't hurt, and I thought she was just the most beautiful lady I'd ever seen. And one funny thing, when we were asked to speak last May, my sister didn't want to do it. She said, "I don't remember anything. I was only 8 years old." She said, I don't remember anything. But when we started to talk about it, what she remembered is how Monty drank a Coke. That she would hold it up like that. That's what Beth remembered, was Monty. And she remembered that we had tried to do it. We went over to the hospital and we just got it all over.
It's the Indian water protocol.
Yeah. But Monty would come to the house and she would play with us, and it was really a very special time for us. And someone asked me at the Los Angeles Sahabas last summer, what was it really like to, you're living in the middle of this country, very isolated from, the rest of the world, and all of a sudden all these people from India are there. And it was like a storybook, you had this very secure life as a child, and I think I told you all the other than, of course, knowing where India was on the big globe that we had, and knowing some things about India growing up, our biggest connection as children was Rudyard Kipling. you know, and stories like Rikki Tikki Tawa, which is always the one that I just, snakes. And also Kim, you know, the jungle boy from India that came on after Buster Brown and My Dog Todd. Anyway. That was our connection, and it was like this whole other world just sort of dropped in. And everyone in the community knew about the people from India. Because it's such a small town, I mean, word just travels like this. And I think Monty came over one day and said that Baba wanted her to bring my sister and me over to meet him. And I remembered that I didn't really want to get very dressed up to do this, because I was this notorious tomboy. I refused to wear a dress when I was a little girl. But Mother insisted that I put on a dress and take a bath at least, you know. And so we went into his room. I think I had peeked at him once before, because I was surprised where he was in the hospital. Because when the first time I'd gone over there, I kind of peeked through this door, and I had seen him in, it's the first room as you walk into that back part of the hospital that's on the right. And he was in the bed kind of facing this way, and I think they moved him later back up to the room where you probably saw. But it was that room that we went into, and I remember I was holding my mother's hand, and I looked at this person over there in the bed, and it seems to me that his hair was on the pillow, okay? But he had a mustache. And of course, that was a little strange for us, because most men where I grew up didn't have mustaches. But he had the most beautiful eyes, and the eyes were just sort of like, it's like when I walk in and I see these pictures, somehow I always sit right where he's just grinning at me. And I'm sure everybody in the room feels that way, but it just undoes me. I have to sometimes just look away, because it's so powerful.
Wow.
But that's what I remember, was that he looked at us, and then he, come here. And he wanted to show us his alphabet board, and he spelled some things out, and I think it was Audie K that was probably there interpreting. And he talked. I can't remember anything that was said, because it was, well, for one thing, I was just 10 years old, but it was such an experience, because we'd heard about Baba for many days, and now we were getting to meet him, and those big old eyes, you know, that just sort of suck you in. So I guess we were in there for maybe 10 minutes, maybe. I can't really remember. But I know he talked, and Audie told us some things, and then we left. And this was sometime during this whole event. My parents had their 25th wedding anniversary. And so they had a party, and they invited all of the people that had come. I remember Sarosh. Baba told Sarosh to do this too. I remember this. Baba told Sarosh to drive to Oklahoma City and get an appropriate gift. And he went.
Wow.
My heart is bursting.
He went to Oklahoma City, and he bought my parents a silver cigarette case. and my parents would, my dad smoked, okay. He wasn't supposed to, but he did. And they never kept cigarettes in it. It stayed on the same place, on this one little table, until my mother moved out of the house after my father had died. But that was always so special to me, because I would see that cigarette case, and I would always have to touch it. just to run my hands over it. And over the years, it kind of tarnished. I think it was silver plate, and the plate started to come off. Maybe we rubbed it too much on it. Anyway, after everyone had left, about probably a month, maybe a month and a half or so, we received this box in the mail, and it was wrapped with this brown paper and probably string. And it had a return address, and it was Bombay, India. Well, I was so excited I could not wait to see what was in this box. And I remember I put it in the floor in the living room, and we were cutting the string off and was tearing this thing apart. And I opened it, and it was that beautiful leopard skin, all intact. And I just thought it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I was so overwhelmed. I was just like, oh. And my mother, was a very practical woman, said, what in the world are we going to do with that? And I said, I have a perfect idea. I want to take the door off of my bedroom, and I want to hang the leopard skin where the door is. Well, that didn't happen. So what happened has upset me for years. But now I have a great deal of peace about it. What happened is my mother took this beautiful leopard skin to a furrier in Oklahoma City. Oh yeah. And she had this little pillbox hat and a belt and an ascot and a muff. So, I even at 10 years old, I knew this was not the thing to do because there's no place to wear such a thing in a little town in Oklahoma of less than 2,000 people. I mean, you're not going to dress up and go to the PTA meetings with your ascot and your leopard muff and your hat, blah, blah, blah. But what happened, what really happened was that I've been able to give parts of this, the hat and the other parts, to different Baba groups around the country. And every once in a while, somebody like Leatrice, I cut a piece, I had all the scraps, I had the paws, I had the tail and all that. And because it was already cut up, it was easy to share. And if it had never been cut up, I mean, it would just, you wouldn't want to share it, But this way, it's easy to just say, here's a piece, and you can. It feels good to do that. So.
Was there a letter with it or something to talk about how Baba was sending this to you?
I'm sure there was, and the letter that was written in your magazine last summer was the one that Daddy wrote back to thank Baba for the beautiful gift that he had sent. And that's the one that you talked about, Tony, where Daddy said that, sort of to paraphrase it, he had been around so many people who, while they understood what it meant to be a Christian, and they professed to have Christian attributes, never before had he seen the Christ so present in anyone's behavior. That paraphrases it, but you all have that letter someplace. I know you do. You've probably all read that. But what was interesting, I had not read it. I never knew that Daddy had written that letter to Baba for many, many, many years. And even though Monty would send us letters, and we would always get these cards from Myrtle Beach. And by the way, always the letters and the cards would go with the silver cigarette case. They had that place right there on the table. That's where they were. People have asked what it was like after, this event happened, and did it really change our lives significantly? Was there this, grand aha. You know. And I have to say that there really was not. My father was very spiritual. He was he always went to church. He sat in the same place every Sunday. He always wrote a really nice check to the church every Sunday. My mother did not go to church because somewhere along the line, she and God had a fight. And she was sort of had this anger towards God. She never expressed it, but there was something going on, and I finally found out that what had happened was when she was a little girl, my grandfather, her father, decided to become a Bible salesman. And he made this career change right as the Depression started. So they nearly starved to death. So in her childlike mind at that time, if God was really a loving God, her daddy would have been able to sell those Bibles and they would not have been hungry. So that was just that little, you know how we all have those things and we kind of carry them, if nothing comes along to change it. So even when the Baba people would come, now I have to say the Baba people because that's what my mother would say. We had a very nice front door to that house, but nobody used that except the Baba people. If you really knew us, you came to the back door. So if that front doorbell rang, somebody was either lost or it was
The Baba people.
And so you have to remember too that this was in the late 50s and then all through the 60s and early 70s. So most of the Baba people were very much hippie-like. They were the Californians that they were coming through town and ringing the doorbell. Well, now my dad would always invite. He always invited everybody in. We'd sit down and have a nice conversation. My mother would sit in the sunroom going, and so this is why what I'm going to tell you about in a little bit surprised me so much. That I always felt that Mother felt that it was an imposition for the Baba people to ring the front doorbell because it was something that happened. They would forget about it, going. And but Daddy was not. He was very gracious and he enjoyed talking to people. And so we were really brought up in that small Oklahoma town with all the values and the culture, the Czech culture, the whole thing. And I have to tell you one thing. When I was around 12 or 13 years old, I was walking to school one morning, and I could show you the spot on the sidewalk where this happened. I was just, walking to school, and all of a sudden, this very, when I say this voice, it wasn't like some clap of thunder and hello. It was that internal thing that you get. It just out of the blue said, I will never give you anything in this life that I have not prepared you for. That was just a boom, right to me. And it was almost like I said, oh, thank you. And I carried that. I've always carried that with me from that time on. But I could show you right where it happened when I heard it. And so really my life was very predictable as you grow up in a state like that, and you go to the state school and you marry and da 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 da. And I was always very connected with the church, but the thing about Mayor Baba was always cooking. This thing was always cooking back here. What had happened? What did it mean? What was the significance of this? If he was such a powerful person, why would he be in a car wreck? Why would he be injured? Why would these women be injured? Just little questions all the time. And so, about probably 87 or 88, I went back to visit my mom. And by this time, she didn't walk. She had to be taken care of 24 hours a day. But she always, every morning she got up, she put her makeup on, and she had her hair combed, and she dressed, and then she would go out, and they would put her in a chair. But this one day, she was so excited. She said, "Lynn is coming to see me." And I said, "Lynn? Who is Lynn?" She said, "Well, she's one of those Baba people." And I said, "Oh, really?" And I said, "And you're excited?" And she said, "She is such a nice person. She comes to see me the same day every year." Well, I thought, this is going to be something to see. I really want to experience this. So when Lynn came, it was Lynn Wilhite, I don't know. Lynn came in, and she went over and she sort of knelt down by Mother and gave her a big kiss and hugged her. And my mother was just like thrilled. And she's talking. I come to see her and she says, "Yes, no, yes, no." Anyway, Lynn Wilhite comes to see her, and it's like she's gone back 25 years and carrying on a wonderful conversation, and she's happy, and I'm just amazed. So I was getting ready to leave, and Lynn walked out with me, and I said, "Lynn, I have to ask you about Baba. I have to know something. Who do you believe he is?" Well, I got the whole thing. And you have to understand, if you all brought up in different religions, and then when you're faced with this and you have this, I'm sure everybody had some resistance. Maybe not, but for me, there's like,
Sure.
I had tried to read God Speaks, because that was the book that he had sent to us, and I think I started trying to read that when I was in high school, and I was so confused, and I thought, how can such a person write such a difficult book? And I thought there was something wrong with me, that I couldn't read it. And now I find out that everybody thinks it's a difficult book, but that was the only book we had. That was the only thing we had, was the God Speaks. So after Lynn had told me that she had been a Catholic nun, and that she was now a Sufi reoriented. Of course, Sufi reoriented just went straight over my head. I had no idea what that meant. But that Mayor Baba was the avatar. And I kind of knew what that word meant, but there's still this resistance. And I'm like, okay. So I'm telling you now the story of being reeled in. Okay, do you want to hear that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad, because that's, and then I'll tell you some other things, but I was engaged at the time, and my fiance was up in Tulsa getting his airline transport pilot certificate, and I was leaving that day to go pick him up. And when I picked him up, he said, "I want to go to Oral Roberts University." and just drive around and see it. And I don't know, have you all been there? Have
No,
any
but
of you
we
seen
know
it?
about it.
You know about it, okay.
Good basketball team.
That's right. But
The praying hands.
anyway, so we go there, and there are these giant concrete hands. I mean, they're 3 stories tall in front of this hospital, and then you drive a little bit further down, and there's this spaceship thing that comes up like this. It's on a big pedestal. It's huge, like this. It's like a big, like a flying saucer just landed or something, and it's a Oral Roberts prayer tower.
Wow.
And all the whole time I'm there, I'm just getting these really negative, all this stuff. I'm just, and so I don't mean to be critical, but that's just how I was. I mean, a lot of people love that, but for me, it was just. And I have to say right here that even though I was really active in the Methodist Church and then later the Presbyterian Church, there was always an intellectual connection. And I always wondered how people could say that they loved God, that they had this really passionate love for God. I thought, wow, that must be really special. I just didn't have it here. I had all the stuff up here, but I didn't have it in here. So after we left Oklahoma, my fiance and I flew to North Carolina to visit his family. And on this trip, we drove to Myrtle Beach to visit a cousin. Now, see, I'm not connecting Myrtle Beach with Baba at all at this point.
What year was this?
88?
I have to think, 1988. And we were sort of appalled that the entire main drag of Myrtle Beach was one T-shirt and beach towel shop after me. How many do you have to have?
Right.
When is it enough? So we were being a bit facetious, and John said, well, Bob, I see you've really developed the strip here. I mean, there's a beach towel shop and a T-shirt shop and what? He said, whatever happened to all the pretty little places that used to be here? And this cousin said, kind of very proudly, says, yep, we've been able to develop every square inch of this coastline except for 455 acres of the most beautiful property in the entire state of South Carolina. And we can't touch it because some crazy woman by the name of Elizabeth Patterson talked her father into deeding it over to some Indian guru way back. And, well, I'm just, I'm getting this charge,
Wow.
And I didn't say a word. I was very quiet. We left. We got in the car, and I looked at John, and I said, John, that's Mayor Baba's place. And he said, we are on our way.
Yeah.
We just went straight away to this place. And now, I'm a real visual person, and I pick up on a lot of things, and we're driving down this freeway, or this highway, and it's just this concrete stuff on this side, shopping centers, and everything's gray and concrete and hot looking. And then suddenly on the left, it's green, and there's nothing. I'm thinking, and we're watching. I'm looking for something, and all of a sudden I saw that little gate, and there was just this little sign on it that said Meher. And we had to turn around and come back. And we went in, and there's that little sign that says, stop at the little cottage before you go in, etc., etc. And so I went in, and this lady came out and said, may I help you? And I said, well, I would really like to see the center. I'd like to be able to go on in. Is that all right? And she said, well, do you do you know Mayor Baba? And I said, well, I do. And I told her my name, and I said, but my dad was Dr. Burleson in Prague, Oklahoma. Well, it was just like, I was so shocked because I had no, I didn't know why she was so excited. You know, I really didn't. It was, she got on the phone and she called Kitty Davies and said, Kitty wants to see you. You remember Kitty, of course. I said, not really. She said, of course you do. She was driving the second car and I said, but anyway, it was just sort of like getting the car, we're on the way. And on the way over there, she's telling me that Kitty Davies is 96 years old.
Wow.
And I just left my mother, who's probably 12 years younger and, you know, is not doing all that well. So I'm expecting to see this woman that's maybe got things in her arms and some, I don't know what to expect. And I remember I walked in there and here she came and she was walking like this. And she had on these darling little lace gloves that just had the fingers cut off, just covered the tops of her hands. And she sat down and we had a really nice visit. And I said, how's Monty? Well, Monty's wonderful. And I'm leaving for London. And then 3 weeks I'll be in India. And I had a tear sheet from a magazine that I had a painting in. And it had a picture of me and it had a photograph of the painting. And that's all I had. I grabbed that tear sheet and I wrote Monty a note on this thing. And I said, would you please give this to Monty when you get to India? So, I know. So I got a letter back, probably it was about a month and a half later, and it was from Monty. And she had her little frogs, you know, like that. She's a little hopping frog on the top. And she said something very sweet. It was, isn't it interesting, or isn't it wonderful how dear Baba brings his dear ones back into his circle at just the right time. And I got this, you know, I got this in Santa Fe. I lived in Santa Fe at the time, and I thought, wow, you know, is he bringing me into some kind of circle here? You know, I'm still, you know, you have to understand, I'm still not with the program. So it wasn't long after that that I had this most amazing dream. I dreamed that I was on this bus. And the bus pulled over. If you've ever been to the Grand Canyon and you go up from Flagstaff, the very first observation point at the Grand Canyon, pull in. And that's where it was. It was right there at the Grand Canyon. And I got off of this bus, and there were people on the bus. They all got off. And I'm looking, and just, you know, I've seen the Grand Canyon before, but I'm like, wow, 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 this is great. I'm not paying attention to what's going on. You know, I'm not paying any attention. I'm focused out here. You know, this is pretty. This is wonderful. Meantime, all these people have gotten back on the bus. And the bus is pulling away. And I ran, and I jumped, and I grabbed a hold of something on the side of this bus. And the minute I grabbed onto this, I had this shooting pain that just went all the way through my chest and all the way out my arms. It was just an intense pain. And it wasn't a dream, it wasn't like a dream pain, it was a real pain. And then I said, I can't hold on much longer. Then I was inside the bus and I was holding on. You know how there's old school buses had a little kind of thing that you could put your hand in on the side there and you could kind of hold on to it? Well, I'm holding on to that, but there's nothing underneath me. and I'm facing the back of the bus. And I look to my right, and sitting in this seat is this Indian man, East Indian. And I said, "Tell Baba to stop the bus." And when I said that, he looked at me and went, "No." And when he did that, I realized that everyone on the bus thought that Jesus was driving the bus. And so I said, "No, tell Baba to stop the bus. I can't hold on much longer." I said, "Tell Baba it's Margaret. He knows me." And when I said that, the man touched the man in front and the man in front. Now, the two people seated directly behind the bus driver in this dream were old friends of mine from Midland, Texas, who were like born-again Christians. And when I saw them sitting in that seat, I said, "They'll never touch the bus driver." But they did. And they tapped the bus driver, and the bus stopped, and the bus driver turned around, and there was this gasp throughout the entire bus. It was a, and this light just shot out, and it was the color of a seashell, that coral pink color, that light. Excuse me a second. And he looked at me and he said, "Pull yourself up by yourself." Just like that. He didn't smile. He said, "Pull yourself up by yourself." Wow. And I just levitated, and I turned around and I sat down next to that Indian man, and the bus went down the road.
What was his face, Baba's face?
Yeah, it was Baba. And so I wrote Moni the dream. And I got a letter back right away. And she said, "We just love the dream." I shared it with everyone at the trust office.
That's Moni.
And then she said, "Surely dear Baba has a wonderful journey for you to take, and now you started." So, you see, I still didn't have any connection with any of you, you know. And I got the books, and I had been reading the books for several years, and sort of struggling at times, and there were real epiphanies at times too when I would read. And so last May, when I was asked to come to the Oklahoma gathering, my sister and I both were invited to speak. I was so excited to go because finally, that's how I felt. There was this like, at last, you know, I am going to find out what this is all about. Now, when I talked to Beth didn't want to come, and it's not. You'll have a different picture of her in a minute. She said, "I don't remember anything, and I don't like to get up in front of people and talk." And I said, "Beth, you have to go with me to pray on Friday. You at least have to do that." So she said she would do that, but I wanted to be there Wednesday night when all the people started coming in. I wanted to meet people. I wanted to be able to have time to talk to people, sort of one-on-one, and find out, finally. So I went out on Wednesday night, and some of the first people, one of the first people I met was Leatrice Johnston. And another really wonderful man. His name is Liam Mullen. You know Liam? I just adore him. And Jeff McGuire was there, and Fred, Big Tall Fred.
Stankus.
Yeah, Stankus, thank you. And Dinah was there. So, at some point during the night, Leatrice and I were able to talk to each other alone. And I said, you know, Leatrice, what do you think is the significance of this accident? Well, first of all, my dear, it was not an accident. And when she said that I felt there was a knowing already. There was already a knowing there. And then I said, why would this happen in this little town? And why our family? Why our family? And she smiled, and she very sweetly said, oh, Baba set your family up big time. And so, I really wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing. No, I'm kidding. It was a good thing. So we talked quite a bit longer, and she started telling me a little bit about how Baba works, and things happen. And she sort of smiled and said, so we'll just see what happens. And you all know Leatrice.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of you do. She's just one of the most beautiful people in the world. She just radiates this love that's just incredible. And she called me right before I came and said to tell all of you hi. And so that night, this is hard for me to tell. That night, I went to bed, and I was very tired. It'd been a real, it was a wonderful day, but there was a lot to digest here. And so, when I went to bed that night, I closed my eyes, and Baba was right here, right above me, right here. And he was looking at me, and he was just grinning from ear to ear. That's why it's hard for me to look at this right. He was just grinning. He just had this huge smile on his face. And I was I was up to here with the grin, and just tears just pouring. And so I said, well, this is nuts. Open your eyes and put an end to this, because your mind's just playing some sort of a trick on you. You're just imagining this whole thing. And so I opened my eyes, and so I closed my eyes again, and he was right back there, and he was just doing the same thing. And he stayed there till about 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my God.
And so I got up that next day, and I asked if there was anything I could do to help set up or run an errand, and someone asked me if I would take Shireen into Guthrie to buy food for Esfandiar. So I took Shireen in, and what amazed me was that she would reach over and she would touch me, and then she would she would do this, and I was like, I didn't understand what was happening. And later she said, I have prayed so long to dear Baba that someday in this lifetime I would get to meet one of the children of the doctor that took care of him. And now you are taking me to town. I still don't, at that time I still did not get it, why this was such a big deal. You know, it was difficult for me. And so when we got back to the camp, she said, now you must meet Esfandiar. So I go in to meet Esfandiar, and she tells Esfandiar who I am, and he's sitting in a chair at the foot of his bed. And he reaches up and he takes my face and he pulls me down and he holds me like this. And then he starts just stroking my hair and touching me like this. And there was something about this beautiful man that I was just, it was like this love between the two of us, just immediately. And I was touching him and doing the same thing to him, and we couldn't quit looking at each other. And then he did this thing, he went, and sit down. He motions for me to sit down. And this continues on. It seemed like it went on forever. And at one point, he took both hands and he grabbed my arm right here. And he just worked his hands down like this. And this heat just from his hands, my arm was just, it wasn't hot, but it was really, really warm. And then he did this thing again where he leaned back and and then he started the whole process all over again. He started holding my hand, touching my face, touching my arms, and this just went on and on. And finally, he said, you know, he did this one more time, and then he called Shireen. And he told Shireen to tell me, he said, you love Baba here, not here. And then he repeated it. You love Baba here, not here. And love Baba only. Well, have you ever had a meltdown? I mean, from the core, it was this meltdown. And I walked out onto this screened-in porch that was attached to their cabin. And it's a beautiful place. It's St. Francis of Assisi Retreat Center. And from this porch, you could look out and you could see these fields of all green, and the trees, and just this gentle breeze that's moving everything. And it's like, you know, it's like 50 years of wondering. It was an amazing time. I never can tell this story without doing this. I'm so sorry.
We're the same.
Okay.
You had to.
Pass the tissues.
So I felt this, somebody tapped me on the shoulder. And I turned around and it was Farshid. And Farshid and one other man had been in the room while this was all this love fest was going on. And but they were kneeling on the floor, and they were so silent, they were almost invisible. I totally forgot they were even in the room. And he taps me on the shoulder and he said, you know, I have to tell you that what has just happened is very rare. He said, I've been with Esfandiar for a long time, and I don't know that I've ever seen this before, but I want you to know something. Esfandiar recognizes you. He said, do you know what I'm saying? Esfandiar recognizes you. Well, that did it. I went over and I found Leatrice. I told her what had happened, and she said, well, you need to go to bed. And so that was Thursday. And I called Beth and I said, I'm not coming into Oklahoma City tonight. I'm staying here. It's so wonderful. I couldn't even explain to her what was happening, and she said, "Really?" Now I have to tell you that she was not well at that time. She really has had a real. She has. At that point, she hadn't been diagnosed yet, but she had a very severe case of colitis. And so she was really struggling with that and hoping she would feel well enough to go to Oklahoma to pray the next day. So I said, I'm going to come in about 6 o'clock in the morning and we'll go to pray together. So I'm telling her this story that I told you all on the way to Prague. And we stopped in the little town of Meeker because the accident actually occurred just outside of Meeker, right about 3 miles. And she met Esfandiar, and she met some of the other people, and it was kind of a, wow, you know, wow. Huh, okay. So we went out to the accident site, and they had a memorial service there. And they started singing the American Artie. And Beth just came undone. That triggered something in her. There was this incredible change in her whole attitude towards this. And so, oops. So we went through the day, and of course, when it came time to talk, I think she took the microphone away from me and never gave it back. She had a great time, and we just talked about it when we drove back that evening. We couldn't stop talking about how amazing it was. And a friend came over a couple of days later that knew our Baba story and was really excited for us that we'd had this opportunity to meet people and to participate in this time. And she walked in and she looked at me and she said, "Wow, something really happened to you, didn't it?" And I said, "Yeah." And then Beth turned around and she looked at Beth and she said, "Oh my God, Beth." She said, "You have really changed." And Beth was walking through the kitchen at that time, and I can't remember what she had in her hands, but she just stopped dead on the floor and just started just crying, just tears.
Oh, God.
It was like you know how you know something, but you really know it when somebody looks at you and said, "Wow, Tony, something wonderful's happening." You know, and it's just affirmed for you in that very moment in time. So that was in May, and I drove back to New Mexico, and my husband was working in Texas at the time, so I was really at home by myself, and I was so exhausted. I would get up about 7 in the morning, and by noon I had to go to bed again, and this went on for about 7 days. But one day, we have a big fire pit out on part of our property, and I'd gone out there because at the Oklahoma gathering, they had the dooney that last night. And so I knew about the dooney, and I kept saying, "What am I going to name my stick? I have to name my stick. You know? It has to have a name." And I thought of several things to name my stick. And for some reason, right before the do me, I named my stick Resistance. And I stood at the opening of the circle where everybody passed by me. And there was something that was a little too ceremonial about it for me. I don't know what it was. I was a little put off. There was something. I never put resistance into the fire that night. So I told myself when I got home I would go out to my own fire pit and I would have my own dooney and I would put resistance into the fire. But we had a fire ban in New Mexico. If I had started even a barbecue outside, I would have been arrested. So I couldn't start a fire. But I walked out to the fire pit, and I was thinking about that book of Mani's dreams. And it just, for some reason, at that very moment, I wanted to go in and call Dinah and say, please send me Mani's dreams, that book. I really wanted that book. And so I was sitting out there, and it's a beautiful place, and pine trees all around, and it's just, the view is fantastic, and I want Bill to come someday if I ever finish this house. And the mailman drove up, and I saw him put the mail in the box, and he put a package down by the mailbox. And so I walked over, after he left, I walked over to the mailbox, and I reached down and I picked this package up, and it was from Philip and Susan Litkendorf. And I opened it, and it was Mani's dreams. And I thought, I don't believe, you know, it was sort of like, okay. So I went to Los Angeles, the Havas, and Bao was there. And Bao was just, he treated me so beautifully. And it, once again, it was sort of like, why? You know, why? But every time he spoke, I had to be right there on the front row, right in front of him. And if he wasn't speaking, I had to sit right here. And if somebody already had their stuff there, they can move it. They can move it. And he was just, well, it was a very powerful time for me. When I came back from Los Angeles, I was so lonely. There just wasn't anyone to talk to. And I started this painting. I've been thinking about it for a long time, and it's, the impetus for the painting is that scripture from the Coptic Gospel of Thomas, split a piece of wood, I am there, and lift a stone, you'll find me there as well. So I was working on this painting, and the more I worked on this painting, the lonelier I got. And at one point I said, you know, Baba, I just need Baba people to talk to. And it wasn't very long until the phone rang. And it was Nancy Wall from Tucson. I met her in California. And Nancy said, well, hi, I'm in Taos. I'm going to be here for 2 weeks. Why don't you come down and have lunch with me tomorrow? I said, I'd love to. So I had lunch with her, I think that was Wednesday, and then she invited Daryl and me over Friday night for dinner. And then she left. And that Monday, I got another telephone call, and it was Philip Litkendorf. He said, hi, this is Philip. I'm in Taos. Why don't you come down and have coffee with me? And so it was Monday, and I sing in a chorus in Taos on Monday, so I went down a little early and had coffee with Philip, and Tuesday morning, I got a call from Leatrice. Leatrice says, "Hi, John and I are going to be in Santa Fe on Wednesday. Would you like to come down and see us?" I said, "Of course I would." So I called Philip and asked him if he wanted to go, and of course he wanted to go. And we were to meet Leatrice and John at the La Posada Hotel. And so Philip and I were there, and Philip all of a sudden stands up and says, "Shireen, Freeney!" And they're walking through the door.
Oh my God.
And so I'm suddenly totally surrounded. I mean, I have Nancy, Philip, Leatrice, Shireen, and Freeney. So we go home, and I go back to my painting. And there's just this one little area up on this upper right-hand corner that is a little too busy. And I wanted to just push it back with the glaze, just bring all the values together a little bit so it didn't jump quite so much. And I literally just mixed a glaze and just did this with a big brush. And I walked away, and I came back in the room, and Baba's face is right there in that painting now, looking at me. His face is just right in that corner where I put that last little touch of glaze. And when I saw it, it was like, I give up already. How much does he have to do?
Yeah.
As much as it takes.
What does it take?
An infinite amount.
So it continues to be that way. I mean, it's almost like for years I've had this desire. It's not. I can't even call it a desire. It's a feeling of something I needed to do. And I thought I needed to become a lay minister. So I've taught a lot of adult Sunday school classes. Just really have enjoyed doing that. And I'm always taking people down a road they've never been down before, it seems. And sometimes there's a this. But I heard about this EFM, which is an Episcopalian lay ministry course. And there was an Episcopal priest in Angel Fire that was going to teach this class. So I thought, well, okay, I'm going to do this. So I went to the first one, and I went to the second one. And sometime between the first and second class, I was reading the Bible listserv messages. And there was a message on this listserv from someone named Tony. And he said something about the fact that he and his wife had just either finished or were starting their second year in this interfaith seminary in New York. And there was something about that, and I thought, that sounds really interesting. And I think I emailed you, and you said to look it up on their website. So I did, and when I read it, I felt like it was Baba talking to me, because it was the reiteration of bringing people together, bringing the East and the West together, awakening to our true reality. And I thought, this is the kind of conversation I want. But this is the kind of conversation I cannot have with the Episcopal group. This is the conversation I cannot have with most of the people in my church. And so I decided that I was going to try to do this. and I needed references. And I thought, well, we just had a minister retire, and he's a very good friend of mine. And we're on the same wavelength. And so I knew he was leaving town. I called, and he was leaving town in 90 minutes. And I said, but I need for you to fill out this reference for me. And he said, at first he said here's my cell phone number, and they were moving to Albuquerque. When I get to Albuquerque, you can mail it to me. And then we talked a little bit longer, and he said, oh heck, just bring it over right now, and I'll just do it. And I drove right to his house, and he sat down and he filled this thing out for me. And it was like if I'd called 5 minutes later, he would not have been there. But when I called about the class, I literally said, okay, Bob, when should I call? Tell me what time I should call, because I'm not playing with you, but I just really want to know. And this voice came back, about 11:30, your time.
Your time.
And I called at that time, and this lady answered the phone, and in 30 minutes I had already had my interview. And it was kind of a done deal. So I took very seriously several things that I'd read years and years ago. And then one thing, I even did a painting about this, was that Baba had said to ignore the degradation of your brother is to bring the same upon yourself. Wow. That was a very powerful statement to me. And I did a really sad, and I don't usually do this kind of work, but this painting evolved. And in my mind, Baba's in charge of what's happening. And the degradation of peoples around the world cannot go on, whether it's in our country or in any other country. And we have brought some of that degradation back upon ourselves because we have ignored it. Another thing that he said that really made an impression on me was that the women in the West would be the spiritual awakeners of his time. And that made that long ago when I first started, I think it was man to God, not man, or maybe vice versa. That made a really strong impression on me, and for some reason, I felt that I was to be a part of that. But I had no idea how it would ever manifest, what could happen. And not that I know now, you know. But that's been a bit of what's happened to me because of this event in 1952. When we were interviewed in Prague, Pascal Kaplan from the Sufis Reoriented in Walnut Creek asked a lot of questions, and what they really were interested in was what it was like to live in that little town in the 50s. What was Daddy really like? What could I tell him about what kind of person my father was? And I will just tell you all events that stand out in my life that for me as a child set my father apart from other people I knew. And one of the things was that he put himself through medical school in the 20s. Wow. And he did every dirty, nasty job that anyone asked him to do to get his education. I may have told you the rat killing story. This was one of the things that just blew my mind. He was asked to take care of the human anatomy lab at the University of Oklahoma, and it was a room about the size of this building if it were all fleshed out and rectangular. It's an old brick building, and it was his job to go in and pull the cadavers out before each class and put them on the table. And then after the class was over, he would go back and he would put the cadavers back into the vats of formaldehyde and clean the place up. So the head of the anatomy department at the school said, Ned, we've got a rat problem in the anatomy lab. Somehow you're going to have to kill those rats. So my dad thought about it, and he said there were 2 lights in that room, and they were just bare light bulbs. And he said, so I went in, I had a chair and a hoe and a sack of rags. And I went around and I found every hole that a rat could come through. And then I unscrewed one light bulb, and I put a chair under the other light bulb, and I stood on the chair, and I unscrewed the light. And I waited, and I heard them come in, and I could hear them scurrying around the floor. And I got off of the chair, and I went around and I stuffed rags into every hole in the dark. And then I climbed back on the chair and I turned the light on. And then I killed them with the hoe. I stood on the chair and killed all these rats.
Oh my God.
And to me that was kind of a horrific story. I could not imagine having to do that. But he was asked to kill the rat. Then he had to kill the rats. And it was part of the way he was able to get his education. And when he came to this little town of Prague, my mother liked it because it was really clean. And there were really nice people there. And he had a little office, a doctor's office. It was up over the bank, First National Bank, and had to go up the stairs. And I remember when he came home and he said that he would build this hospital. This town needs a real hospital. And he had bought the lot, all that land behind us, and that was where we played baseball and all that stuff. And we said, well, where are you going to build this hospital? And he said, back on your baseball field. And of course, at the time, I guess I was probably 8 when he came home and said he was going to build this hospital. But anyway, somehow he got all the money. He formed a corporation, and I know he wrote the Ford Foundation, and the Ford Foundation paid for the X-ray machine. Some other foundation paid for the surgical suite and everything in it. But somehow this man was able to do this. He had no money. He was just a small, he was a very good doctor, but he was practicing in a small town. But this hospital happened, and it happened just in time for Baba to get there, to be treated.
Wow.
Another day he came home. We always came home from school at lunch and had a big lunch. And Daddy was always there for every meal of the day, unless somebody was sick and needed him. But he would usually be there every meal. So I remember this day he came in and he said, well, guess what I just did? And of course, we never knew what he was going to do. And he said, I just bought that whole section of land just west of town. I said, why would you buy that land? Are we going to move? No, we're not going to move. It's just going to stay there. And nothing else was said about this. Well, Daddy was on the school board, and he was on the school board for over 32 years. And he knew that the high school, sometime in the near future, would be condemned because it was that old. So sure enough, one day, the high school was condemned. And everybody else on the school board said, what are we going to do? And Daddy said, well, you're going to build a new school. And they said, well, where are we going to build a new school? We don't have any land. I said, yes, you do. You have a whole section of land right on the edge of town. It's yours. Wow. And they said, well, what's it going to cost us? He said, I didn't say you had to buy it. I said it was yours. He said, divide it in half, build a school on one half, sell the other half for homes, because we need new homes in this town, and you'll pay for your school. So there's this big complex now out there. It's all...
And the school. Wow.
Yeah. We had people that worked at our house. And there was one fellow, his name was Monroe. He was this big black man. He didn't talk very much. But he came up and he took care of my mother's flower beds, and he always got the garden ready for us in the spring. And any little thing that Daddy didn't have time to do, why Monroe would come up and he would do it. And I never knew until I was an adult that Monroe had a very serious illness, and that my dad took care of him all those years. And he said, oh, just come up and, get the garden ready and just take care of Julia's flowers. That'll be enough. And the whole time growing up, we had this big trunk freezer, and it was full of the weirdest stuff. We had catfish out of Deep Fork River, which my mother had no intention of ever cooking. Trust me on that one. She would not allow those stinky fish in her kitchen. But that was payment, I'm sure, for some surgery. We could walk in and find 4 or 5 bushels of cucumbers that someone had just dropped at our house, and immediately that night we had to make pickles. We had chickens, we had all sorts of things. And I remember one time Daddy said something about there were people that owed him a lot of money. He would never allow my mother or anyone else to collect. He never sent out a collection notice. He never called anybody and said, you need to pay this bill. He said, if you'll just pay me $1 when you get your paycheck, if you'll be really good about that, that's just fine.
Wow.
And none of us children lacked anything growing up. We didn't miss anything. As a matter of fact, when I was 14, my dad came in and he said, get in the car, we're going to go downtown. Of course, downtown is like, And so everything was a yes, sir. I got in the car and we drove down. He went to the Ford Motor Company. And he pulled around back and he said, get out and go in that garage right there, and there's a little white car in there. I want you to go in there. Just go look at it and come back. So I walked in, and there was this beautiful car. was this little, I mean, it was just this wonderful car. I wasn't even sure what it was, but it was a 1956 Ford Thunderbird. With a continental hill in the back, and the whole 9 yards, you know. And so I remember I walked all the way around it, and I was just like, wow, this is wonderful. This is a great car, because I loved cars. And he did too. So I went in, I sat down in the car, and he said, "Did you like that car?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, will you go in, get in that little white car and drive it home? It's yours." And I said, "But Daddy, I don't have a driver's license. I'm only 14. He said, "Do you know how to drive a car?" "Yes, sir." "Drive it home." And so, but that's just the kind of person he was. He loved for us to go shopping when we get our school clothes. We'd always go to Oklahoma City, and we immediately had to put on a style show. We had to wear everything for him so he could see everything. He absolutely adored us. He absolutely adored us. And years later, I was having some prints made in Oklahoma City, and I went to the color separator, and he introduced himself, and I looked at him, and he looked very familiar, and I said, "Did you go to OU?" "No, ma'am, I didn't get to go to college." I said, "Well, did you go to school in Oklahoma City?" Because I knew a lot of kids in Oklahoma City. I got to drive my Thunderbird to Oklahoma City a lot. Anyway, he said, "No, I grew up in this little town it's about 50 miles east here called Prague." And I said, "Oh my gosh, James Hardison, do you know who I am?" "No, I really don't." I said, "Well, when you knew me, my name was Margaret Burleson." Well, he's this great big guy, and he just went, and he grabbed me, and he gave me this big hug, and he said, "Come in my office, I have a story to tell you." So I sat down, and he said, "Do you remember when our house burned down?" He said, "There we were, we didn't have," he said, "I think I had one pair of underwear and a t-shirt. I didn't have a bed, I didn't have clothes, we didn't have anything." I said, "You know, I do remember it, because Daddy wanted you guys to move into our house and live in our basement until you had a place to live, but my mother wouldn't hear of it." He said, "Well, let me tell you what your daddy did." He said, "And I will never forget this as long as I live." He said, "I went to school." He said, "I don't even know where I got the clothes. But your daddy called my dad and said, 'Can you come to the house? Because we have some things you could probably use.'" And I think they found a place to move into, a little house, but they had nothing. And his daddy had said that he didn't have any way to move anything. He didn't have a truck or anything. And I remember this. I came home from school and I didn't have a bed. My bed was gone. And my dad had come in, and he took, my sister and I had twin beds in this one room, and he took my twin beds. No, they were my twin, yeah, she had the other room by this time. Took my twin beds, and he took the bicycle that I didn't ride anymore, and he'd gone through all these clothes that my brothers had left behind. He took them clothes, he took them pants that my mother didn't use, our beds, and everything. He said, "I came home from school that day, and I had a place to sleep." And he said, "And I will never forget that as long as I live." And he brought all that to our house. And, you know, Daddy would just kind of come in the house. It was a big old house, and he'd just see stuff that we didn't use anymore, and he'd just kind of walk out the door with it. I never knew where it went. My brother's trombone, you know, was going one day, and a violin was going one day, and, you know. But that was just, for me, to have that memory brought back, you know. We laughed about it because I remembered that I didn't have a bed that night, and he did. But that's the kind of person he was. We had to drive 18 miles to a swimming pool. And one of the things that Daddy taught us early was how to accept disappointments. Because the big thing for us was to get to go swimming, for him to take us swimming. And he would say, you know, maybe on a Wednesday morning or a Friday morning, okay, at 3 o'clock this afternoon I'll be home, and we're going to drive to Seminole and go swimming. Well, we would just live for 3 o'clock because we loved to go swimming. And I can remember sitting in the car and waiting and waiting. And this happened several times. And Mother would come out and say, well, Daddy can't go today because Miss So-and-so's appendix just ruptured and he has to take care of, you know. Okay, that's fine. And we were disappointed, but we realized that there were other things that were much more important than him taking us swimming. But we always knew if he wasn't there, he attended every football game, every basketball game, every band concert, everything we ever did. I mean, he was always right there. Wow. And but that's the kind of person he was, and a really incredible role model for me anyway. Wow. Do you all have any questions? I feel like I've just blabbed for a long time.
So you had
How old's your brother?
Mike is.
Or in relation to you guys?
Mike is 6 years older than me.
Okay.
And I had another brother, David, who was 8 years older. And David was killed in a car wreck in 1974.
Wow.
Were they present when Baba was brought into your father's home?
Yeah. What's interesting, I called Mike about 2 weeks ago, and I said, I really want to know what you remember. And he said, you know, I have to think about this. I don't have anything concrete. I don't have like a story. He said it's kind of a blur, but he said I've got to think about it. And I asked him too if he had the copy of God Speaks that Baba had signed and sent to the family. And because I really wanted that located, it means a lot to me. And Mike said that he had it. And he said, it's in my will to give to the Sufis reoriented down in Walnut Creek when I die. He said, I think they'd really like to have it right now, but I'm not going to give it to them because somehow it is a part of my spiritual journey, and I'm just exploring that now.
Wow.
What that's all about. But he said, I want to keep that with me right now because for some reason it means a lot to me.
Wow.
So.
Could you tell us something about, you had this direct experience of Baba and his companion, but at the time you didn't really know about his worldwide work and how famous he was in certain quarters and etc. How did that dawn on you, and how did the family come to understand how important this person was to hundreds of thousands of people around the world?
I don't know if, I can only speak for myself, I don't know that my parents ever did. I think that Daddy felt that Baba was just the most extraordinary person he'd ever encountered. But when you're raised in that very Christian part of the world, you know, you're really brainwashed to the extent that, I mean, people still, if you begin to even talk about this, you know, you'll get, well, this was not Jesus coming back. Because when Jesus comes back, he's going to be on a white horse. So I just did this mural in Texas last summer, in July, for this veterinary hospital. And it has the white horse charging in up here on the right. And there's this big tree in front of him, and so you just see him coming, and the mane is flowing, and there's a snake that's coming down out of a tree that's looking at this white horse, and there's a parrot that's looking at this white horse. But below that, there's a lion, and the lion is looking down at a frog and a fox, and the fox is looking down at a rabbit. And they're very focused on the next meal and what's happening, like I was at the Grand Canyon. They're very focused at what they think they see that matters. While these two symbols, one, the snake for wisdom, and if you'll notice in many of the paintings of the artists from the Taos area of the Southwest, there's always a parrot, and that puzzled me for a long time. Why is that parrot? Parrot's not really an indigenous bird to New Mexico, but the parrot was a symbol of wisdom and knowledge. So you find these parrots hidden in these paintings about the Native Americans. So my daughter, who's a very devout Christian, beautiful, beautiful woman, and she's very spiritual. She's just beginning to understand a little bit. She walked in and she said, "Mother, I can't believe it. You have painted, there's a perfect verse in the book of Revelations. Jesus is going to come in on a white horse." And I said, "Really?" And she said, "You knew that." And I said, "Oh, really? Oh, yeah, yeah." But it was just a little coded thing that I had to do, but it's fun.
You share this with your daughter, or?
No. She is, at least she was involved in this very, really kind of a very sweet little Baptist church there in Fort Worth. Even, she was raised in the Presbyterian church, but she got involved in this, and she was head of the finance committee, and she's a real smart gal. Anyway, more and more she kind of got pulled into more of a fundamentalist, that whole thing that's happening in Texas right now. And so I can talk to my son Matthew about this. Matthew's very, wants to know. Jeff wants to know. Jeff is now 32, Matt's 35, and Michael's 38. And
You have 4 children?
I have 3.
3 children.
My daughter's name is Michael.
Oh, okay.
And but Michael, if I had gone to Michael after everything that happened in May or July and tried to tell her about this, it would not have been good news. I'll say that. But a very interesting thing happened. She and her husband have been having a very difficult time in their relationship. and it kind of rocked her. It shook her. And at some point in our conversations, I said, you know, Michael, you've just become distant and very difficult to talk to. And I said, something very important has happened in my life, and I can't share it with you because I feel the wall. And she said, oh. And the wall fell. So, we still have not had a chance to just, for me to tell her what I told you tonight, basically.
Could you say a few words about how the community at Prague is experiencing these people coming through town and having these mini pilgrimages, and we have this event, the 50th anniversary, and people thinking about buying the land across the street and things like this. How are they taking it?
That land deal, they're trying to keep that very quiet. They don't want any of the local people to get upset about it because, you know, they still don't understand it. When Lynn Wilhite was trying to set up a place to have that meeting in Prague, it wasn't because of the kind of event, it was just impossible to find a place to do it because it was the weekend of graduation. And so they had all the graduation parties. There was the big wedding at the Methodist Church, and on and on. And so for some reason I thought about it, and I thought, you know, I bet they didn't ask about the old sanctuary because there's the new sanctuary and then the old sanctuary. And I called the Methodist minister and I said, I know we can't use the sanctuary because there's a wedding. I know we can't use the fellowship part because it's set up for reception, but can we use the old sanctuary? And he said, we've torn all the pews out, and it's a children's recreation area now. And I said, that's fine, we just need a place to be in case it rains, and maybe have some chairs. And he said, I don't see why you couldn't. Well, that's where we're supposed to have it because that's where we went to church. That's where we worship. We didn't attend church in the new part. That was where we as a family went to church. And one of the ladies that's kind of like a second mom to us, we wanted her to come, and she's also on the board of the library, and they were trying to give all that collection of books to the library. Well, the lady that ran the library had decided in her mind that this was a bunch of radical kooks from God only knows where. And no, we did not want these books in our library because surely it was the Antichrist or something. And so this good friend of ours, she's I think 82 now, we said, Olene, is there something you can do? And she said, well, absolutely. She said, we're not going to be censoring books as long as I'm around. She said, they wanted to throw Harry Potter out. And she said, I read it and I didn't find one thing wrong with it. And I told them that was ridiculous, to just put Harry Potter right back in there. So I said, would you come to the when everybody comes, would you come and be with us? Well, I don't know about that. You know, she started to get real uncomfortable, and I said, come and be with us. And so she was real, you know, it was almost like, you're going to come, and she was there, and I could see her, you know, she was way back, kind of eyeing everybody like this. But then everything relaxed. And then you could just see that people were getting into that moment and really enjoying it because there was so much to enjoy. So I don't know how I could answer that. I think they call it the accident, with the accident. and there are people there that remember certain things. But so many of the people who were adults at that time aren't alive anymore. So, you know, and I think the Baptist Church has pretty much taken over the entire non-Catholic scene in that area. So it would be a hard battle.
There's anybody besides your family that was touched deeply by Baba's presence there, that talked to him or whatever? Do you know that? Is anybody else there?
Not that I know of. The nurse that rode in the ambulance back to Myrtle Beach with him was there, and it was really interesting. I expected her to have a lot more to say, but I don't know if she was frightened by a camera or she was, I believe she's Catholic. I don't know if she was just sort of like, I don't want to, you know, yeah, I don't want to get involved in
We
this.
didn't get to meet her.
No, you didn't.
No, I
They
think
barely-
Pascal interviewed her.
Yeah, and it was, she wouldn't talk when
Right.
Pascal
No.
interviewed her. It was just like, he couldn't believe it. He was so frustrated. All she would say is, I don't know, I don't remember anything. I don't know. But she probably spent as much time with Baba as Daddy did.
Does your father say anything about the unusual about Baba's, that he noticed, being a doctor, you know, he noticed anything unusual about Baba dealing with the pain, with whatever, you know?
Yeah, he said he never heard him complain, he never heard him
That's-
moan, he smiled the whole time. And the one thing Daddy was really worried about, he wanted him to get some proper fitting dentures so that he could chew his food properly. He was really worried that Baba wasn't eating well because of his teeth. So,
Where did your parents come from originally? You mentioned that they settled in Prague after he went to medical school, or did they come from there? I mean, did they choose to come and live in Prague, or did they come from...
yeah, they chose to live there.
Was there a reason that you know?
They first went to Borger, Texas, and if any of you ever been to Borger, Texas, you know, it's an oil town in the Panhandle. It's very flat, and it's when they went, it was during the Dust Bowl days, and there was not a blade of grass, there was not a flower, and my mother could take it for about 3 months, and she says, we're out of here. And they just happened to hear that this little town needed a doctor.
Wow.
All the threads coming together.
Incredible.
Oh, I know. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
It is just amazing when you look back at events that you think have very little significance at the time they occur. But when you start to weave the whole thing together,
So when you start to do that, you personally?
probably about 88, 89.
I thought you had realized that who Baba was before that time. You didn't?
No, see, it was all cooking. I had a lot of questions, and I had these intuitive feelings, but I didn't have any of you to talk to.
But did you correspond with money? So you could ask questions.
Well, you have to understand my relationship with Monty was that of a 10-year-old child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I
Even
mean
though-
later.
No, even though later, you see, when you're a little girl and you played with this beautiful woman, and she's like a sister almost, but you didn't have. It wasn't that we wrote like once a month or once a year or anything like that. We didn't have this ongoing dialogue, and I just had for so many years I had this thing inside of me that says, you have to get to India because you have to see Mani. And I've never been able to go.
It's not too late.
Oh, I know, I want
No,
to go.
Mani's not here.
Yeah, Mani's not, but that's all
Yeah,
right.
you should go in.
That's all right. But
I feel like what you've said is like almost Father speaking directly to me through you. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. When I do this, I think I don't write anything down because it just feels like it's like I'm telling a story. And things, if I tried to write it down, I couldn't write it down. It just kind of evolves and happens. And it's like I really feel honored to be able to do it. I have to tell you that. It's such a thrill for me to be here with all of you.
Honored.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Is that the end? Or is there?
That's it, but I want to get you hugging.
I guess that Angela will have to address. We gonna see Beth around?
I don't know.
Is she cooking?
Beth she is
percolating?
so busy. Beth's cooking. I want to tell you all, my husband and I have been building this house for like 6 years, and when it's finished, it's another one of those things, like, I really didn't have the money to build this, so we decided we'd build a straw bale house. And we've done all the work ourselves, and I even went to school at UNM and got my electrical license, so I could wire.
Wow.
And so, when the plan for this was it would be a bed and breakfast. And as this goes on, I begin to see it more and more as a place where people can come and just be in this beautiful space and quiet and peacefulness and more of a retreat. So hopefully we'll have this thing up and running within this next year. And the next time you see me, I'll look like Popeye with all these muscles. Faster
I think most of us have never been to Oklahoma.
Well, this is in New Mexico.
New Mexico.
Yeah, this is in New Mexico.
New Mexico's amazing.
Most of us haven't been to New Mexico.
It's amazing.
But I always wanted to
You
get to Oklahoma.
Oh, you all, I wore the bracelet.
Yes, that is the bracelet.
This is the bracelet. I wore the bracelet.
Who gave you the
I wore the bracelet because, I drew this off, and I have a really wonderful friend, a Russian friend. Well, this is, I have to pull this out. It's very hard to pull out.